Likutei Sichos Chelik Chaf, Volume 20, the second Sicha for Yutes Kislev. This Sicha will explain the greatness of the Sefer HaTanya, the book of Tanya, which is the fundamental book of Chabad Hasidism, and its special connection to the celebration of the liberation of the Alter Rebbe on Yutes Kislev. As an introduction to familiarize ourselves with some concepts that will be mentioned and discussed in the Sicha. Number one, Monday, the second day of the week, if you look in the 6 days of creation, is the only day on which Hashem does not write the words Ki Tov, that it is good. By all other days it says that Hashem said, this shall become into being, that shall become into being, and it says, Vayar Hashem Ki Tov, Hashem saw that what he made, and quote, it was good. However, on the second day, it does not say that. Why? One of the main reasons given is because on the second day of the week, that's the second day of creation, Hashem divided the waters. He split the waters. The whole world is full of waters, and he had now the upper waters and the lower waters, as we know the world as it is. And thus, since this involved division, which inherently is not a good thing, therefore it doesn't say Ki Tov, because it's not the ultimate good. Whereas on the third day of the week, that is the third day of creation, well, there Hashem had created several things, and twice, meaning double, it says the words Ki Tov, that Hashem saw, quote, that it was good. And that's why Tuesday is considered to be a very special day. That's one concept. Another one is the idea of Yofutzu Ma'inasecha Chutza, spreading forth the well springs of Chassidus, of the secrets of the Torah, Chutza, to the outside. This is the primary focus and the primary purpose of Chassidus, and as was told to the Baal Shem Tov, this is what's going to bring the Geula. This is what's going to bring about the redemption, which is going to bring about the ultimate revelation of the secrets of the Torah. Now this began primarily, or I should say in quote-unquote in a real way, after the arrest and liberation of Alter Rebbe, as we say it, after Petersburg. Another thing, in general, the number 3 is a very, very powerful and a very special number, because it's a number which represents reconciliation, or bringing things together, connecting sometimes even opposites. Classical example, two people who have opposing opinions, or perhaps are even in an argumentative state, and they cannot see eye to eye. Comes a third party and is able to reconcile between them, able to mediate between them, and bring them to some kind of middle ground. So that is the power of 3. Or for example, we say it every day in davening. Before we start Hoidu, we say V'chein shnei chsuva machishim zeh zeh ad sheyaveh kosav hashlishi v'chiyah b'neihem. Another thing is what was really the accomplishment of Matan Torah, of the giving of the Torah. We know that even prior to Hashem's appearance on Mount Sinai, they were very privy to the Torah. We know that it says Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and all their descendants were not only privy to Torah, but they studied Torah and they observed Torah. So what exactly changed? So we know the famous medrash that says, gives it by means of metaphor, that there was a decree, and the Hebrew word for decree means a split between the Elyonim, the upper worlds, meaning the spiritual worlds, and the Tachtonim, the lower aspect of the world, meaning the physical aspect of the world, the material aspect of the world, that they cannot connect. And what happened? By Matan Torah, Hashem came down and he abolished this separation, this decree, and from then on, now they can fuse together, and that's why we take the spiritual and put it into the material. And also to understand that what happened was, before Matan Torah, the Torah was not widespread. Yes, there were those who were privy to it, but it was a select group. It wasn't widespread to the whole world. Another final thing to be familiar with is the Perek Lamed Beis in Tanya, the 32nd chapter in Tanya, which we call Perek Lev Lamed Beis, means a heart. And in there, the Alter Rebbe explains that the love for another Jew has to be even to the extent, as he says, he quotes the Mishnah that Hillel says, that you have to be oihev es habriyos. You have to love even the creatures, meaning those who are creations of God. And the Alter Rebbe explains that that is a reference to people who are such a lowly level that they possess absolutely no qualities. The only quality they do have, in other words, the only virtue they do have, is the fact that Hashem created them. Even them, you have to reach with love and so on. Let's get into the Sicha. In his famous letter, in connection with the redemption of Yutas Kislev, the Alter Rebbe writes, quote, on the third day, meaning on the third day of the week, Yom Shlishi, shehuchbal by Kitov, on which Kitov was doubled, which was the 19th of Kislev, that's the month calendar. When I was reading in the book of Tehillim, the verse, Pada b'shalom nafshi, that Hashem redeems with peace my soul, that's when I went out, I was freed, b'shalom, in peace. Now, since the Alter Rebbe emphasizes that his redemption was on the third day of the week, on which, he makes also a point to emphasize, on which, huchbal by kitov, that kitov was doubled, so it's obvious that the theme and the motif of the celebration of the redemption of Yutas Kislev has a connection to the theme, to the motif of the third day of the week. What is the idea of this? The point of explanation is as follows. We know that when did Hafotzas Hamayonos, the spreading of the well springs of Chassidus, really begin, like means primarily or mainly begin, as we said, in a real way? It started after Yutas Kislev, after the redemption of night of the Kislev. And therefore, we can say it's almost like a beginning. It's a landmark. It's not just a milestone, but it's like a milestone which actually has the idea, the essence of a beginning, a new beginning, or a real beginning. This can be paralleled to Matan Torah, which is the spreading of Torah in the world. That also is connected to the number 3. Where do you see that these two are connected to number 3? So we know the Gemara says, in reference to Matan Torah, to the giving of Torah, that it was given to a nation of 3, because we're a nation that divides into 3 groups, Kohanim, Levim, Yisraelim. It was given on the third day, that is the third day from when Moshe told them to separate from all impurities and so on, and to consecrate themselves for preparation of Matan Torah. And when was it given? In the 3rd month. The 3rd month, that is, counting from Nisan, which the Torah says is the 1st month, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, and the 3rd month. Likewise, we also see this by quote, by the giving of the secrets of the Torah, the Pnimius HaTorah on Yutas Kislev, where you see, first of all, it's in the month of Kislev, which is the 3rd month, counting from Rosh Hashanah, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, and also, as the Alter Rebbe emphasizes, it was given on the 3rd day, that is, it happened on the 3rd day, which is the 3rd day of the week, Tuesday. What is the real explanation? What's the real understanding of this? So the Rebbe says that we know that the Torah is called Shalom, peace, as the Rambam emphasizes that HaTorah Nikreas Shalom. The Torah is called Shalom. Why? Because the whole purpose of Torah is to bring peace, to bring harmony between, as we said in the introduction, between the Elyonim and the Tachtonim, which was the abolishing of the decree, to bring harmony and fusion and togetherness between the spirit and the matter. And this expresses itself in the number 3. How so? Because when you think about it, the number 1, it's solitary. It's alone. There's no room for another. Now, when you have 2, as we said already, both in the idea of 2, you have 2 separate things. And especially considering that the 2nd day of creation, number 2 day of creation, brought about a division. But once you have 3, now you have a reconciling a power. You have something that brings peace, it brings things together. Likewise, happened by the redemption of Yutas Kislev, that practically speaking, it could be said that although the Alter Rebbe did spread Chassidus prior to his arrest, which perhaps was one of the reasons for his arrest, however, it wasn't a real spreading of Chassidus, certainly not to the outside elements. Not the outside elements of the person themselves, which is one's intellect. That's the most outer thing in a sense, because it's not your inner soul. Because yes, there was Chassidus, but it wasn't on that deep level of explanation as came about later after Yutas Kislev, and also certainly it wasn't with the greatest pirsum. That means it wasn't so publicized and spread as the Alter Rebbe did after the 19th of Kislev. So what did the redemption of Yutas Kislev bring about? It brought about, again, a fusion, a connection between Elyon, What is Elyon here? The upper, meaning the inner secrets of the Torah, to the Tachtoin, to the lowest, which is the Chutza. So it's the Mayonos, which is well springs, which comes from the very inner source, to the Chutza, to the outside. And this is also the reason why the Alter Rebbe makes a point to connect, to establish a connection between his redemption to the idea of Shalom. And that's why he says, when I was reading the pasuk that says, Pada b'shalom nafshi, that's when Yotzasi b'shalom, that's when I went out b'shalom. And now we can appreciate the connection to, quote, the double kitov, the double good. That the Alter Rebbe makes a point, not only to say that it happened on a Tuesday and the third day of the week, but also that this is the day shehuchal b'kitov. Why? Because double kitov indicates the idea, what is the double good? Toiv lashamayim v'toiv labrius. As the Gemara says that the ultimate tzaddik is one that is, quote, good for heaven and good for the people, good for the God's creatures. What does that mean? That it's a good which brings two things, perhaps two things that are distant and opposite, but it brings them together. What are these two things? Elyon and Tachtoin, the uppers and the lowers together. And this we find in Chassidus. In the one hand, what does Chassidus do? Chassidus instructs the person, Chassidus directs the person to soar very, very high, which you can say in a sense is like Shamayim, to go up to the heavens, spiritually speaking. But on the other hand, what does Chassidus do? Chassidus demands of a person and directs the person to have Avos Yisrael, even to Brios, as we said in the introduction, as explained in chapter 32, in Perek Lev in Tanya, that you have to have Avos Yisrael even to Brios, even to those who the only virtue is the fact that they were created by Hashem. So now we have appreciation for the number 3, for the fact that it's double kitov, and the connection between that and Matan Torah, how it all comes together. Says the Rebbe, there's another inyan in this, and that is that Chassidus has the characteristic of peace, of shalom, the aspect of 3. Why? Where do you see it? Because since it encompasses all kinds of people, from the highest, which you would say is the Elyon, to the lowest, to the Brios. As the Alter Rebbe himself writes in the cover page of the Tanya, that the whole purpose of the Tanya, what is the Tanya? To teach us how to serve Hashem. And he says that this is not just for tzaddikim, this is not for the lofty and pious, this is for everyone. And he brings the verse which says, Kikarev elecha hadavar, that this matter is close to you. He's quoting from the Torah, and the Torah speaks to each and every one. So the Alter Rebbe says that this is for every single person, from the loftiest to the lowest, to the simplest person. And he says that this is going to be in a long, short way, meaning that it's practical and accessible to each and every person. On the other hand, the Alter Rebbe, not only is he saying that it's even for the lowliest of people, but on the other hand, the Alter Rebbe, in the course of the Tanya, explains that sometimes you can have a person that has already reached a very high and lofty level, and yet they're not considered a servant of Hashem because they're not growing higher. In other words, the Alter Rebbe says that the Tanya is geared for even the lowest, the simplest of people, but it's also geared for the highest of people, to push them to soar even higher. Otherwise, they're not serving Hashem. And Alter Rebbe stresses how this is all karev ma'od. This is very close to the person. In sum total, this is the aspect of shalom. That the whole idea of the Tanya is that it's for everyone, it's to everyone, it's for everyone, and it's to bring everyone higher and closer to the secrets of the Torah. According to this explanation, now we'll appreciate even more that special connection between the 19th of Kislev, between Yutes Kislev, the celebration of the redemption of Alter Rebbe, and the Sefer HaTanya, the book of Tanya. We know that the Alter Rebbe was imprisoned for exactly 53 days. And as explained by the Rabbeim, this corresponds to the 53 chapters of Tanya, a chapter per day, or a day per chapter. And as the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, writes, and it says in a Sicha, that the 2 years of increased chayes, excitement and devotion of the Hasidim in the service of Hashem as a result of the Tanya having been printed, that is the merit that stood by the Alter Rebbe and saved him from the worst. What does that mean? You see, the truth is that the Tanya was printed 2 years prior to the story of Yutes Kislev. And this is what the previous Rebbe means, that for 2 years it had such an impression, and it lifted up the spirits and the excitement of the service of Hashem, that this was the merit that the Alter Rebbe had. But of course, if that's the case, then the obvious question could be asked. We said that there's an inherent connection between Yutes Kislev and the Tanya. Well, the Tanya was printed prior to Yutes Kislev. So what exactly do we mean by that? How does it connect specifically to Yutes Kislev? And the answer is that although it was printed 2 years prior, but the novelty, the accomplishment, the idea of the Tanya is connected to the essence of the idea of Yutes Kislev, the motif of Yutes Kislev. How will we understand this? We'll appreciate this by means of a famous adage, a famous saying by our Rabbeim that say that Tanya, the book of Tanya, is the Torah shebiksav of Chassidus, is like the written Torah, like the 5 books of the Torah of Chassidus. That means this is not only because the Alter Rebbe had himself written it, versus all the other Hasidic discourses that were not written by the Alter Rebbe. They were delivered by Alter Rebbe, but were written by others. Even someone like his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, but still not by himself. So you can say that it was written with absolute accuracy. But in other words, this is not just the idea of saying, okay, it's like Torah Shebiksav versus Torah Shebal Peh. It's like the written Torah versus the oral Torah is the same kind of, so to speak, ratio or lack of comparison between the Tanya versus all the other printed Chassidus. That's not exactly the point. There is a deeper connection. In other words, in referring to this as Torah Shebiksav, you see, because there is an inherent difference between Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh, which actually has an effect in halacha. You see, in Torah Shebiksav, the written Torah, if one just reads the words, the actual words, doesn't understand what they're reading, they still have a mitzvah reading the Torah. And case in point, you get called up to the Torah, you make a bracha on it, and you don't necessarily understand what's being read. And yet, you're allowed to make a bracha, and you have a mitzvah of Torah. Versus Torah Shebal Peh, the oral law, you can't just read the words and expect to have fulfilled your obligation of learning Torah. Certainly you can't make a blessing on it. Why? Because there what's required is understanding, comprehension. That's one difference. And also as a result, another difference, in Torah Shebiksav, we have to be very specific with the actual words and the letters. You can't write one letter more, letter less. You have to read it correctly and so on and so forth. Versus Torah Shebal Peh, that the objective is not to read it correctly, to read the words, because it's not precise, but rather to have the correct understanding of it. This explains why Torah Shebiksav was given specifically after Matan Torah versus the Torah that they had before. You see, before Matan Torah, of course there was Torah, but it was more in the sense of Torah Shebal Peh. Meaning, although they did write it down, they did record it, as the Rambam says, for example, Avram Avinu wrote books and handed it over to Yitzchak, who passed it on through the generations, so they had something to learn from. But yet, the objective, the accuracy was not in the actual words, but rather in the ideas that were disseminated, that were shared. But it wasn't so particular, it wasn't so exact. In other words, it was something more elyoin, something aloof, something higher, something spiritual, right? The ideas, the spiritual ideas. But it wasn't so particular about the actual physical words that were down here, that were written down here. By Matan Torah, when the Elyonim came down to Tachtoinim, as it says in the Medrash, as we said before, then, quote, the Torah went down. It went down into actual writing, which is Maisa, which is physical and material. And it came down in a physical form. And it became a situation that now, when you hold a Torah scroll, which you think about it, what is it really? It's just cow skin, cowhide, and some ink. And yet, because it was written with that accuracy, that the holiness of the Torah gets now enveloped and connected to this physical thing, the thing becomes holy, becomes a holy object. It says the Rebbe likewise will appreciate why the Tanya is called the written Torah of Chassidus. See, the Alter Rebbe wrote it in the course of 20 years. It took him 20 years to write it, says the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he was very, very specific and very, very exact and very accurate, very detailed in every single letter. To the extent that when he handed it over to the publisher, he asked him, he begged him, please be very careful about, the added or the subtracted letters. You have some words in Hebrew that sometimes you can write with a vav, without a vav, with a yud, without a yud. And he asked him to be very careful about it because he was very specific about it. In other words, there was great emphasis on the physical, actual letters, the actual words. This is Pnimius HaTorah, the very high, the very greatest and loftiest ideas, getting connected and fused together with physical letters. This is connected to the idea of Yutes Kislev. What was Yutes Kislev? What did it do? It took the well springs coming from the inner depth, meaning the Elyonim, and it helped spread it, as we said, after Yutes Kislev. It took on a whole new form. It became like in real way, this spreading of Chassidus. It took it to the Chutza, to the lowest, to the Tachtoin, to the most outer reaches. And just like in Torah Shebiksav, what's included in Torah Shebiksav, in the written Torah, everything that was studied until Matan Torah, and then everything that's in Torah Shebalter that will come later, even those things that were revealed, and in other words, they were not known till many, many, many generations later. For example, something that's coming up soon, Hanukkah. And even that is all hinted in the Torah, is all included in Torah Shebalter. In other words, you can always trace back and find it. Likewise, it's in regards to the Sefer HaTanya. The Sefer HaTanya, included in it is all the Chassidus that was taught, of course, afterwards, meaning all the Maimarim, all the discourses and deep explanations of all the Rabbeim, beginning with the Alter Rebbe to our Rebbe. It's all included in the Tanya. It all can be traced back. It's all there in the Tanya. And also that which was taught prior to Yutes Kislev, prior to the publication of the Tanya, namely, especially the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, which the Alter Rebbe disseminated. That was also included and incorporated in the Tanya. So now we can appreciate very much why the Tanya is called the Torah Shebiksav Chassidus, just to sum it up, and how it goes back to the idea, and therefore it's parallel, of Matan Torah, and therefore it's connected to the number 3, and to the idea of Shalom, bringing harmony, bringing peace between the Elyon and the Tachton, and this is how it all comes together. So the Rebbe says, from all of the above, we appreciate the greatness and the great advantage of studying Tanya. Of course, in conjunction with studying Chassidus in general, you need to have Torah Shebaal Peh, and also appreciate that through this, we will come to the ultimate revelation, the ultimate Elyon connecting with the Tachton. What's the ultimate Elyon? That when we have Mashiach, and it will be the revelation of the Torah Shel Mashiach, which is the Torah of Mashiach, which is the greatest Elyon, the greatest level of Pnimius HaTorah.